society. From the tension and misery, we got to place our priority. Spend more time with the family. Teach them to love and respect and the moral values they won't forget and go mad. Mad, 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 mad. The family is like an institution. You gotta nurture with love to build it strong. Live your life positively, leave behind a legacy for the world to see. Benefiting society, save society from trouble. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Never let the family fail. The backbone of any nation rests on the foundation of family. Save society from trouble. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Never let the family fail. The backbone of any nation rests on the foundation of family. Trust me, family. Save society from trouble. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Never let the family fail.
That's right, and most of the time, that's why you hear, right? It all begins in the home, right? Parents, you're always getting it, so you know what you have to do. Just do it, no man. Yes. All right, tell you what, it is indeed another fiery one, all right, there, always on the star. Well, I'm about to say the Good Morning Comrade show, but tell you what, this morning it's on the records with our comrade brother Carlos James. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, and let me say good morning to listeners of Star Radio, those who are streaming here from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. If you're streaming from North Windward as far on the northeast, and Monique said she had a lovely weekend in North Windward over the long holiday weekend. And of course, those who are streaming on the other side, northwestern side, my beautiful constituency of North Leeward, the people of North Leeward who I love so much, all the way down to Kingston in the suburbs, and of course the Grenadine Islands, the northern and southern Grenadines. Let me say good morning to all of you, all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But a special shout out to those who are tuning in from the diaspora, those who are listening far and wide, those in North America, in Canada, Toronto. I met a family from Ontario on the weekend as well. Those who are here who were tuned in from that side of Canada, those in the US, in New York, in Miami, Florida, those wherever you are, and of course in Europe, and don't forget those in the UK as well, Britain, who are tuned in. Far and wide, persons are listening to these broadcasts and programs on Star Radio. I think I go on again. The folks who continue to support this station and the platform, we do appreciate all of your support, all of your love and solidarity, and of course those who continue to advertise on Star Radio. We do well appreciate the support, and without your support, Star Radio would not be in existence. So we are really grateful for those who continue to advertise, as we continue to spread the message across St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and of course those who are listening and being informed across the world about the developments that are taking place here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Some early persons on: Natasha Macmillan, Isil, and Jacqueline, George. Kojo has to be a resident ambassador for Star Radio. He's on every program, every program for Star. Kojo is there and also making some valuable contributions as well. Cherry Harry is on, Alex, Annette Vera. We have the usual crew who would lock on, and I believe Darky, though I'm not seeing her online. I just read a message from her. She's saying, well, we want our 17 minutes back. Good morning, Darky. And I do appreciate those who make a conscious effort to tune in very early to listen to these programs on Star. So if you're online, I encourage you to share the live and share the link to Star Radio that is broadcast across all social media platforms, particularly Facebook. And so if you're logged on, please share the live, informed, call a friend, call a neighbor, let them know On the Record is being live streamed, and it's live on 98.3 FM here on Star Radio this lovely Tuesday morning. Anita Stewart, Montila Bode, Beverly Williams, Catherine Crook is on, Jamila Bailey, Marva Nanton, Jocelyn Fraser, who've just joined as well. Vicky Graves, she's locked on. Wonderful Chateaubriand lady there as well. Good morning to you. Those who are listening. And we want to shout out we have some birthday greetings to former candidate who and caretaker for South Windward, Rodon John, who's I believe still in Taipei. I want to shout him out on his birthday today. So those who are locked in here from South Windward, you can send your regards to him as well. And I believe Mrs. G is celebrating her birthday today as well. Good morning to you, wherever you are. I believe that the comrade may have traveled on the weekend. He was in Guyana at their 60th anniversary celebration there, Jubilee. And, wherever he is, and if he's locked on and listening with Mrs. G, good morning to our political leader and comrade who has done so much for St. Vincent and has made such a valuable contribution to our development. They can attempt to erase a lot of things, but if it's one thing they cannot erase, is the legacy of Comrade Ralph. And that is something that all of us know, the contribution that he has made. Bashi, original, I see you locked on. Glenda Batiste, who's joining us all the way in Brooklyn, New York City. And tomorrow is her birthday as well. So happy birthday to you in advance, Glenda. Of course, you're encouraged. Morris Small, you're good to see you on. And thank you very much for your solidarity and love, comrade. I'm happy to have you here on the program this morning. So if you're on, I'm encouraging you to share the live, to, call your friends, call your neighbors, share it, tag someone, let them know, share the information, because what we do, we provide information here on these programs. We're on the record, and we want to ensure that when we share the information, that persons are informed. And we don't want you alone who are listening to know what is happening. We want everybody to be informed. And that's why we're encouraging you to, of course, share the information on when the program is on, when the Morning Comrade program is on air, when the On the Record program, you share the information, you share the live on your social media platforms and pages, so that persons can also see and view the information. Laurel Matthews, I want to say a special good morning to you as well. I know you're overseas, and I very much miss you here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Laurel is the former board member for the Social Development Public Assistance Board in North Leeward, but also a former educator. And she taught me in school, a very wonderful quality woman, hailing from Rosebank. I want to say especially to those persons in Rosebank. Miss Harry, good morning if you're listening. Fordy John, our good comrade, is on. Yes, comrade, morning. Velma Bentic, who is all a lovely Chateaubriand woman. A lot of Chateaubriand persons are locked on and represented. Elester Carroot, good morning to you as well. Iona Nichols, yes. So we have all the regular comrades here, Monique. And I can't go on and call every name that is long, but I want to shout out especially the persons who are contributing and making their comments online. Of course, good morning, Linda. Linda Barber is also here. And as the comrades share the live and they continue to encourage persons to listen to the programs, listen to the informative narrative that is developed and crafted here on Star Radio. We don't do propaganda in the sense of misinformation. What we do is we provide an educated view, a view for persons to balance what is being said and what is not being said. Of course, I always say listen to what is being said, but also listen importantly to what is not being said, because that is where the information lies. I want to also shout out especially my co-host who is missing this morning, the lovely KMP, Kisal Melissa Peters, who is, she is in the US. She is there on some personal matters, and I want to shout out to Kisal and her mom. I know her mom is continuously a listener to, an avid listener to the programs, and I want to say a special shout out to Kisal and her mom there in the US. Hurry back, Kisal, because you know there's no on the record without Kisal in the seat next to me, and with her beautiful hairstyles and her flushing face, always smiling and very cheerful. So good morning to you wherever you are listening. Of course, Vikisha Jack, who's just joined. Idris is a Chateaubriand woman who I believe is in Barbados as well. I mean, you're locked on overseas and in any of the Caribbean islands. Good morning to you as well. So we have had a very long weekend, starting, if I may go as far back as Thursday when we had the holiday, the National Spiritual Baptist Day, and we had a walking day on Friday, and then of course Monday, yesterday, was another national holiday here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I just want to take the opportunity to commend the hard-working persons behind the scenes who have really been instrumental in the hosting of the Spiritual Baptist Day activities. And we're talking about all of the members of the movement across the length and breadth of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we had a delegation visiting here from different parts of the region, but more specifically, a lot of them came out of Trinidad. They paid a courtesy call on the former Prime Minister, Dr. Gonsalves, and we were happy to host those persons who came and really showed their love and solidarity and support to the Spiritual Baptist movement here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Of course, many of you will know that it was this ULP government. We passed under the Public Holiday Amendment Bill of August the 27th, 2024, the legislation to officially establish May the 21st as a public holiday, making the country the second country after Trinidad and Tobago to dedicate a national holiday to the Spiritual Baptist faith. And many of you would ask, well, you know, why is it so important to have a public holiday for the Spiritual Baptists and not the Anglican and the Methodists or the Adventists? And you have to appreciate the historical legacy of where the Spiritual Baptist movement is coming from. In fact, in 1912, here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there was a bill passed in the Parliament called the Shakerism Prohibition Ordinance, which was a piece of colonial legislation passed on October the 1st, 1912, to make it a criminal offense to practice the Spiritual Baptist faith. Many of those people who are now joining the movement, and there's been that anti-Spiritual Baptist sort of discussion, and you know, be fearful of people who are in the Baptist movement, and they're Obian, and you have to be careful with them and don't go to their church of worship. And you know, the Spiritual Baptist movement has its legacy reaching far within Africa. It's a mixture of the doctrine of Christianity, mixed with a lot of the African cultural and traditional practices, which when the slaves came to the Caribbean region, they practiced. And of course, with the introduction of the English language and the English way of life and their way of practice in terms of worship, some of that was mixed into the African tradition, and which gave birth to what we call the Shaker movement, And in 1912, the colonial overseers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines felt threatened by this movement, and of course they had this prohibition ordinance drafted and passed as an act to essentially ban anyone found practicing the spiritual Baptist faith was considered a criminal. And of course this ordinance passed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it set what I would consider a dangerous legal precedent, because from that period other colonial authorities follow suit. You had in Trinidad, they copied the exact prohibition ordinance that was passed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and they called it in Trinidad because, as you know, the history of this thing, the spiritual Baptist movement, the Shaker movement, started here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and during periods of migration, persons from St. Vincent, they moved to Union Island, and from Union Island they moved to Grenada and to Trinidad in the south. And that is where the idea of the very first time you had the spiritual Baptist movement being introduced in Trinidad. And instead of calling them Shakers down there, they were named Shouters. And from the 1912 Prohibition Ordinance, they then created one in Trinidad exactly mirroring the one in St. Vincent, which was named the Shakerism Prohibition Ordinance. And in Trinidad, because the name was then moved from Shaker to Shouters, they call it the Shouters Prohibition Ordinance. And that was passed in 1917 there in Trinidad, some 5 years after it was passed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it was also similarly passed in Grenada in 1927. There was a ban on the practice of the Shaker movement and the Shouters, and essentially practicing spiritual Baptist faith was deemed and considered illegal in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in Grenada, and in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why it is so important for us to carve out in law a special provision to recognize the right of what you call freedom of association, the right to practice your own religion, because all these are constitutionally entrenched in law. You have just like you have a right to attend your national council meeting and your convention of your party, because it's called the freedom, the right to assembly as part of the constitutional provision. It is also the right for you to practice your religious beliefs. No one cannot prevent you from practicing your own religious beliefs. And that's also a constitutional provision. So when we go to the parliament and we recognize as a public holiday the Spiritual Baptist Day, May the 21st in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it wasn't done for any political grandstanding or because we felt we needed an extra holiday in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was done specifically to recognize the legacy of the Shaker movement, the legacy of many of our parents who came and were part of this movement. And even over time, many of us, our families were from the Spiritual Baptist movement, but we shifted. We became conservative. You had to associate with being an Anglican or a Catholic, as you moved up in the social strata, because to associate with the Shaker movement was seen as backward and not just illegal as in the ordinance of 1912, but also associating with things that are bad and dangerous, because that was the propaganda when you touch on concern, the movement, the Shaker movement. So it's important for us to recognize our spiritual Baptist faith, those who still practice. We have to give respect to them because the period in which we are coming from, where the right to practice your religious belief and the right to freedom of association was considered an illegal act, criminal act, in October the 1st, 1912, when the Shakerism Prohibition Ordinance was passed. So, of course, the ULP government, we corrected once again a historical wrong in going to the parliament in August of 2024, where we passed on and have in law May 21st designated as a national public holiday in recognition of the national spiritual Baptist movement and the historical legacies and struggles of our working people. And even look at the people who are associated with the spiritual Baptists. They are working people from the poor and working class, ordinary people, whom we have always had policies in this ULP government, the form of government, which we have always had policies designed to recognize, appreciate, and support our working people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Of course, we had another holiday yesterday. Many of you would celebrate it as Fisherman's Day, May the 25th in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But we often forget an important aspect of this May the 25th. It's African Liberation Day as well. And the commemoration celebrated May the 25th internationally to honor the continent's struggle for freedom, unity, and independence from foreign colonial rule. This, in fact, was originally established as African Freedom Day in 1958. Yeah. The historical records would show that May the 25th in 1963 as well, there was a gathering of leaders from 32 independent African nations in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And of course, the recognition of this day, African Liberation Day, has been a symbolic one globally for members of the not just the Rastafarian community, but members of who are traditionally aligned with the Black Power movement and those who are Pan-Africanists. And we recognize the African Liberation Day as an important milestone, an important period. And if you grew up under the teachings and the lessons of Garvey, you will appreciate and understand why May the 25th is not just another day to celebrate the fisher folk, who are very important people and who work continuously across our shorelines to ensure there's food security. They continue to support that traditional values of ensuring that rural communities, which are mainly comprised of farmers and fisher folk, there's that continued economic activity within that sector. But I don't want us to look past an important period on every May 25th. We have to stop and pause as well to recognize the movement of our African people and the struggles of our African people. And when I say African people, I'm not just referring to those on the continent, but members who are considered African. If you're an African American, if you're Afro-Caribbean, if you're Afro-European, wherever you are, we have to recognize the struggle of what African Liberation Day represents and the struggle of our black people generally across the world, and how difficult it has been for our movement and our people. And as we say, emancipating ourselves, not just from physical slavery, but from mental slavery. And, when you tie in what I've just said earlier about the Shakerism Prohibition Ordinance of 1912, and which was followed by the Shouter Prohibition Ordinance in Trinidad in 1917, and you link all of that to the African Liberation Day marked on the 25th, and our holiday here of May the 24th, so you can see the connection, you can see the nexus of how important it is for us to recognize not just the spiritual Baptist faith, but all our peoples, or African peoples, those who are Pan-Africanists will have a greater appreciation of what I'm expressing. But we cannot forget the legacies of both the good things that we've had and the accomplishments, but also our legacies of underdevelopment, where we continuously speak on the issue of reparations, reparatory justice, where we continue to speak on the issue of reparatory justice for the enslaved African bodies, and also genocide to indigenous people across the Caribbean region, or from countries and islands washed by the Caribbean Sea. You cannot ignore the fact that even just a week ago, I read, a couple of days ago, Pope Francis, who delivered a very powerful and important but delayed statement apologizing on behalf of the church, the Catholic Church, for their role in slavery. And that is something which I know many of us, we have to pause. And here it is for the very first time. The Pope, which is the highest, if I may want to say, the highest clergy in terms of his position and portfolio within the Catholic faith and movement, has paused to reflect, and this is officially from the Vatican, has essentially paused and reflected and apologized for the delayed acknowledgement of the church in its role, and the role that it played, the supporting role, a very prominent and supportive role that the church played in the slave trade. And that is something which I think ties in as well with aspects of where we're talking about our National Spiritual Baptist Day, and 4 days thereafter, the recognition of African Liberation Day here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And let us not forget the fact that the former Prime Minister is also now an advisor on the Repair Campaign, which is a think tank and a non-governmental organization that was established and created to advance and support the push for reparatory justice within the Caribbean region and globally and at large. And of course, all of this and everything that I'm saying here is interconnected and has meaning. And of course, it boils back home to St. Vincent and the Grenadines when we connect in the dots from Thursday to Monday, a weekend of reflection of our movement and our struggle and of our peoples and where we're coming from. So I just wanted to dedicate the first aspect of the program this morning on those thought-provoking conversations, which very often sometimes we shy away from, and I want to ensure that persons never forget the struggles of our people, particularly people within who practice the spiritual Baptist faith and members of the spiritual Baptist movement. All right. I note Anita is inquiring about bling. Bling, yes, bling is okay. he's recovering. He's getting better. He is in studio. He's just stepped out shortly. But of course, Bling is well and on the road to recovery. So thank you very much for inquiring. Persons were very concerned about his well-being, and he looks a bit shaken up. I can see he had a very, very bad flu, but he's recovering and doing quite well. A few other persons have since joined, and Glenroy Brung, Norsa, Gillian Pear, Fit Use Lady, Judy Thomas, yes, Gwyneth Ryan. We have Jesse Bennett, who's also joined, Ketora, Spring Village, and Val, you came late to the class today, but good morning to you. I see you're here. So is Venda Smith, who joined, came to the class late this morning as well. Good morning to you. Sylvina Monica Hooper, who's locked in, Cornice Hanaway, and of course Dory, who's here, and Dulcie, and Trevor, and Kim, and of course all of the comrades. Tammy, who was locked in as well. We did the shout outs earlier, but of course those who have just joined, good morning to Venda, who is at work. I don't know if she's balancing it, but we appreciate you being here with us this morning as well. Peter, Audrey is here live and direct. I thought she had class too. Good to have you, comrade sister. Shalda Pompey and Lana Labode is here, and yes, I'm coming to that issue. Lana, I know you're locked on, and we have that Peter Jacobs, Mava. Yes, one love to you. Elvita Durant is always locked on. Yes, and I'm happy to have you guys here with us this morning. So there are a few things I want to touch on this morning, and very importantly, I want us to go into a few issues. One of them is going to be in relation to tourism and what we're seeing at play here in relation to the development that is taking place with sandals and the national conversation on that. I want to go into a bit of that conversation this morning, but also I want to touch on a very important issue, and that important issue has to do with a mining operation that is taking place, a second mining operation that is taking place in Wale-Lebu, in north of Richmond, in North Leeward. So we're going to touch a bit on that this morning as well. And I want to encourage you to, of course, if you're locked on, share the program. If you're on the various social media platforms, we're going to open the lines earlier than usual today because I want to have a bit more discussion. Of course, the number to call is 534-7827. That's to get in on today's discussion within another hour, 45 minutes or so. But we've been hearing the discussion, a renewed conversation on, which I would quite frankly put as an attack on sandals here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I don't know if this is a political strategy by the NDP, based on the fact that Sandals just recently announced that several developments, regional developments, investments that are going to take place. They had St. Vincent and the Grenadines initially at the front of the queue in relation to this. And those who are listening would have heard our comrade lead on this issue last week. They had St. Vincent and the Grenadines at the front of the queue in relation to the development of the Beaches Resort, spending in excess of what I would say 300 to 500 million over the period of development, with the initial first phase of a 300 million investment to expand and to build out a brand new resort at the location we know as private mountain. And of course, that facility you would have seen about 300 plus rooms. And what is interesting about the beaches development was the amount of persons that will likely visit St. Vincent and the Grenadines as the hotel opens up. Now, unlike Sandals, where it's a couples resort, so per given every room, you'll have 2 persons per room. They would very unusual that you will have a Sandals resort with 1 occupant per room, because it's promoted as a romance tourism destination, tourism for destination weddings and vacations, honeymoons. So it's really a couples resort. And the beaches, however, is the concept and marketing behind the beaches. It's a family resort, which means that you're not just having the husband and the wives come into a vacation at the beaches facility when they're in operation, but you're going to have children, because a lot of it is centered around activities for the family and children in particular. So you're going to have children, you're going to have grandchildren, you're going to have family reunions and so on, aunts and cousins and so on. So it's really a more family-oriented design and makeup in terms of its structure and concept, which often means more visitors, and often means once you have more persons per room, it means you have more hire in terms of persons who are hired to ensure that the services and delivery of the services and so on, as it relates to persons who are occupying the rooms on the resort. Now, we know very well that the NDP is anti-foreign investment. Well, at least this new NDP dispensation. And we know that because of the utterances of the now Deputy Prime Minister, while in opposition, said, we are going to cap foreign investment. We have too many of them here, and there's too much influence. And if I may quote him or paraphrase what he stated on a radio program while in opposition, and he mentioned the likes of Sandals, and he mentioned the likes of Renault. He said they're investing too much, and the overall influence that they have, we have to cap foreign investment. So we know of the history and the grounding philosophy that what makes up this new NDP government is that if you're bringing foreign investment to the country and you're bringing too much investment, they may have concerns with that. But what I didn't realize while in government, what was said in opposition is exactly what they're doing in government, because I understand the investors came here, they had meetings, but sources within the government are now saying that they are not keen. They are more interested in what Sandals had and what they want to do going forward. And as a result of that, it is going to delay any type of investment that Sandals is likely going to bring to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. For the very mere fact that if you're meeting with a government that is not investor friendly, is not too welcoming to you coming to do business in a country, then why would you go to that country to invest? And where they had St. Vincent high on the roster to spend in the first phase over $300 million US, they have now pushed St. Vincent at the very back of the roster, whereby other developments in Barbados, in Turks, and in Jamaica, and the Bahamas are now taking precedent to develop, because St. Vincent and the Grenadines was seen as the gem and the new development tourism hotspot for many of the North American visitors who would come to the sandals establishments across the region. Everyone was talking about St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was hot. It was high on the radar. And because of the peak and the interest of guests and visitors and even travel advisors, they clearly needed more room stock. And that is why they're expanding even right now at Sandals. They're putting additional rooms there. And that is why the push now to have the resort at Private Mountain established. But what we found is that members of this current administration are now spinning the narrative that Sandals, and they're doing this through their emissaries and persons and talk radio, that Sandals was getting too much tax concessions and locals are not benefiting from those tax concessions. And I would say here, as a former Minister of Tourism, that every available concession granted to Sandals is available to any investor, whether you're local or foreign, if you're matching the type of investment that Sandals is bringing, the Simmons and the Grenadines. That is how we categorized and treated those types of investments. If, for instance, another investor were to put in the resources and investment that Sandals was bringing, they will also benefit from those same concessions. And even currently, there are locals who are in the tourism and hospitality sector that benefit significantly from similar investments and from their own very investments in the tourism sector. And I want to highlight a few of the initiatives which were done even under my tenure as Minister of Tourism. Now, there is something called in St. Vincent and the Grenadines a Hotel Aid Act. And hoteliers under this Hotel Aid Act and other tourism-related businesses, once you're registered as a tourism service provider, there are several concessions that are available to you. The hotel incentives, the act itself was designed to provide incentives for hoteliers who are renovating, doing refurbished work, expansion of their existing hotels, and the construction of new hotels within the hotel sector. And added to that, essential capital investment in equipment as well. So it means that every hotelier, once you're registered with the tourism, the Ministry of Tourism and the Tourism Authority as a registered tourism service provider, there's 100% waiver of import duty on materials and equipment for hotel construction and expansion or improvements. And this is available to locals, nationals of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Every hotelier who is a national, every single sheet, linen, bed mattress, teacups, forks, cutlery, air conditioned unit, fixtures, furnishing, every single component of the hotel that you need to import here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there's 100% waiver to, once it is being imported, to, one, aid in the construction or expansion of the hotel, or two, in the operation of the hotel itself. If you are a Vincentian and a registered tourism service provider, these things are available to you with a 100% waiver on import duty. I want to make that very clear. In the hotel sector as well, there's something that we call a hotel construction order. And under that order, which is done through the Ministry of Tourism and ratified at the cabinet level, once you're expanding or building out a hotel and you are a local, a national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you are tax exempt based on the value of your investment, sometimes in excess of 18 years, 20 years, 25 years from paying tax. I'm not talking about foreign investors who are coming and setting up companies to build multi-billion-dollar investment. I'm talking about a local hotelier who has a 12-room, a 15-room, a 20, 25-room, a 30-room, a 50-room hotel operation here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and you are a citizen, a national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You are afforded tax exemption once your hotel is being constructed, sometimes in excess of 12, 18, and 20 plus years of exemption on paying tax based on the value of the investment that you're putting in if you are a local. There are many persons in the hotel sector. They would not come to the public and say, well, I am benefiting. These are the list of things I am benefiting from A, B, C, or D. But these are, and I'm not pinpointing any one or two individuals or companies that are locally registered who have benefited from this. But what I'm outlining are the incentives that are available under the Hotel Aid Act in law for local investors, persons who are in the business of tourism, who are citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Of course, you're exempt from capital gains tax because we don't. That's not a feature here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines anymore. But corporate income tax relief goes up to sometimes, as I said, 15, 18, 20 years. And all you have to show to qualify under these incentives under the Hotel Aid Act, you as a national must start with a minimum of 5 rooms in the construction phase. If you're building a 20-room facility, even better. 25, 30, 50, even better. They are more, it's scalable. So the more the investment, the greater the incentives. And these are available to locals. And I've signed off on hundreds of these for local operators within the tourism sector. I want to make that point very clear. Then you move to those operators who are not hoteliers but are in the tourism sector. A few years ago, I brought to the cabinet of St. Vincent and the Grenadines a proposal to facilitate a full 100% duty for taxi operators and service providers. Once you've been a registered taxi operator for a minimum of 3 years with the Tourism Authority and the Ministry of Tourism, and you're going to bring in a brand new vehicle, whether you're driving out of Correa's car park with a tour bus, a Nissan or a Toyota from Silky. Once it is brand new, you get 100% duty on that. And once you can prove that you've been a registered taxi operator with a recognized taxi association, but also registered with the Tourism Authority for a minimum of 3 years, that is afforded to you. We didn't just stop there, because I recognize that not every taxi operator can afford a brand new vehicle. We sat with the presidents of the taxi associations and we came up with an in-house formula where we are trying to phase out a lot of the old vehicles in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We say, well, you know, we don't want a man with unless it's a vintage or antique vehicle. You driving with a vehicle, a registration 1992 vehicle, picking up people at the airport or the cruise port, and the vehicle going down the road, and you can hear all the shocks so we said, look, listen, we're going to allow persons, even if you're bringing used vehicles to the country. And we say used, we went as far, we stretched it, we say used vehicles of up to 8 years old. You are facilitated with concessions on those. And we scale those concessions. The newer the vehicle, the greater the duty. If it's a brand new vehicle, it's 100% duty. And let me tell you something. There are a lot of taxi men who went for the option of the brand new vehicle. And I'll tell you why. It's not just good economic sense in terms of, wear and tear and having something that is more durable. But they make a lot of good money. So they could afford it. They can go to the banks, they can get their bills of sales and so on. Because their numbers are there to show in any given month or during the season the type of money that these men make doing tours. But we said, okay, well, if it's 4 years old, up to 4 years old, you get a 75% off. If it's up to 6 years old, you get a 50% off. I think that's how if it's, and we scale it down. Because, we have this policy here with vehicles beyond 12 years old in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You attract more fees at the port. So we didn't want to encourage the operators to bring in vehicles beyond 12 years old. So we left it at about 8, thereabout. And there are times, even if you brought a vehicle 10 years old, 11 years old, 9 years old, we would still give it consideration. And those were some of the measures. So when you go to the airport and you see all these brand new vehicles lined up, or these vehicles that are just 4 and 5 years old, they're not just there because taximen wanted new vehicles. They're there because of a direct policy initiative by the ULP government. A policy initiative that I brought to the cabinet of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and to the government and was approved. I understand now that there are some taxi operators who are applying to upgrade their fleet and they're being rejected. A particular operator called me and informed me of that. Then you go to other subsidiary operators or ancillary operators within the sector who are not hoteliers or taxi operators. We're talking about tour operators now, and like, for instance, those who are into adventure tours like Coastal Adrenaline, and those who are doing kayaking tours and so on, and these. They too also receive incentives. Those quad bikes you see Coastal Adrenaline have, then they're promoting. One of the first companies to establish in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the adventure tours. They too also receive concessions to bring those in. How do you think they were able to bring them in? Because the level of the investment that is required, you'd first ask yourself whether or not it is worth the investment and the duty that you have to pay and the shipping and so on, and how soon would you be able to make back on your investment and so on. The risk that is there in the business. We said to them, look, we are going to facilitate full duty on these because we need to see more businesses and more ancillary businesses in the tourism sector in terms of water taxis and marine tours and land tours, adventure tours, eco tours and so on. Providing that you are a registered operator. We facilitate duty. I understand there's a new policy now where they're cutting back on the concessions for tour operators. So if you were to talk about a government that is progressive or one that is going backwards, have a conversation on why are tour operators in St. Vincent and Grenadines now being asked that they have to pay duty on the importation of equipment to provide their service in the tourism sector. That's a question we need to ask. Because under my watch, nearly every operator, and you have to understand the period, we opened up a period where we wanted to stimulate growth in tourism, stimulate growth in the local economy, but also the ancillary services in tourism, the professionalism, the type of services like zip lines and quad bikes and kayaking and marine tours. You see all those catamarans you see, and even power boats that you see taking these marine tours to the Grenadines and so on. Once you apply for duty on those, to bring them in, you get the duty. Once you are a registered taxi, once you're a registered tourism service provider and has been in the business for a period. So every vessel you see doing a marine tour, once you apply for concessions as a service provider, you are guaranteed the duty. Every adventure tour operator you see operating, there's some lovely ones that I mentioned. I singled out Coastal Adrenaline, but there's another one established, Leeward Adventures, as well on the Leeward side. There's one that before we left government, we're working with another tour operator to do another quad biking operation somewhere in the Pembroke area as well. It was a young local entrepreneur who I guided and facilitated. I said, look, this is what you need to do. You have to set up a company. You have to have public liability insurance. You have to move in this direction. You can't just bring them in, and you have to be a tourism registered service provider. He came to me, said, look, you need some help with this. I could have said, well, no, we don't provide duty concessions for persons who are going into this business. I caused them to be registered. I said, you have to go and sign up. You have to do your due diligence. You have to ensure that all of your necessary supporting things are in place. And much to the I wouldn't say disapproval, but you had some pushback from the Ministry of some financial officials who were saying, well, he is not compliant, he's not this. I said, look, I would help the young man. I will ensure he gets his company registered. I will walk through with him to ensure he has his license and so on. Facilitated, went out of my way to do that because I saw a young man trying his best to create an opportunity for himself and others in terms of creating opportunities for employment. And these are local businessmen and women. Sightseeing with Cass. That's the young lady who's now doing the transparent kayaks, but she's expanded now into other types of marine equipment and so on. Doing a lovely service. There are programs which she would have applied and gotten support on. And some of the things which she applied, she brought them into this state. As a service provider, she's qualified for concessions on them. So when you say locals are not benefiting, we created the avenue, opened up the door, metaphorically speaking, to allow more locals to benefit in the tourism sector, more local investment within the tourism sector. And the ancillary services surrounding the core services within tourism. Many of the local providers, service providers, were the benefactors of that. And as I said, the caveat was once you are a registered tourism service provider, some of them didn't want to register for other reasons and so on. But once you come into the requirements as a service provider to be a registered tourism approved service provider, these are some of the concessions which we facilitated. So the question we have to ask now is whether or not there is an effort by the new government to shut out a lot of the locals who are now applying for some of these concessions. Because I've had reports by service providers who have indicated to me that they have applied for concessionary terms and they are being refused. Things that they qualify for based on the provision in the law, based on the policy initiatives that we put in place. They have been shut out by this current administration. That's what we need to talk about. Not what Sandals got, because it's available to locals as well, but we are now currently shutting out locals from some of those concessions. That is a fact because I've had reported phone calls and emails from several service providers indicating that. One such operator, he didn't contact me, but I understand he said it publicly. Kingsley the Freighter, everybody knows him is a taximan, a taxi operator. I heard he applied for a concession and they refused him. I would mention his name. I'll single him out because he made it public. There are several others who confided in me and sent me emails and communication to that effect. But Kingsley was on a radio program and said, well, he applied and he was refused. I don't know if they have since retracted that denial or refusal of the concession for his new taxi he was trying to import. But that is what is taking place right now. Let us not talk about what Sanders get and didn't get in. Let us talk about what we're shutting out our own locals from benefiting from, that we created for local opportunity for local people, with concessions available for local people to expand our tourism. And that is what is taking place right now as we speak. So as I said, there are similar tax initiatives or incentives available to local investors. And especially those who are doing the ancillary services, as I said, the tours and marine tour, land tours and so on, the taxi operators. But the hoteliers locally, they benefit from tax breaks of up to 20 years based on the level and the volume of your investment. And if you put in, let's say you build a 200,000 or 300, 400,000 facility at the bare minimum, and you're saying, well, how come you didn't get what Sandals got? Let's value what you have put in. 250,000 versus 500 million in US. I mean, let's be real. So there are concessions that are scalable to accommodate every type of investor. And as far as low as the threshold, the minimum requirement, if you have 5 rooms, once you're building a facility with 5 rooms, there are concessions available to you. Any lower than 5 rooms, well, the question would be whether or not there's a house you're building for yourself, or you're saying, well, Monique, maybe it's a house you're building and you wanted to get the concession, so you say it's an apartment. But we said we brought it as low as 5. So you can even build a 6-room apartment. You take one the room as the operator, and the other 5 rooms, once the other 5 rooms are available for tourism, you get concessions on that, for local people, any part of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That is something that we made available. And I don't know if it is widely known by all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because one of the discussions I recall when going to Union Island, at one point we're in Union Island, meeting with stakeholders, and we're talking recovery. And I said, Union Island isn't a unique island in itself. It doesn't have a major hotel development. There are challenges surrounding that, and there are reasons why that is not the case. Whether it's issues with land ownership and disputes, or the category of investment, and whether or not it's environmentally sustainable to put one on Union. Union is a very unique place with a lot of animals and so on, indigenous to the island, and very prone to climatic challenges and environmental challenges. But there's a hotel operation, a resort very close to Union Island, in Palm Island, and one in Myro. But I said to those service providers in Union, I said, listen, rather than building back a 2 and 3 room and 4 room house in the reconstruction, why not aim towards expanding your room stock, so you can have your quarters on the top floor, and you can have on the ground floor an Airbnb, 2 and 3 rooms. Every Easter you go to Union, you cannot find accommodation. I said, if every house in Union had 2 rooms available to add to the room stock in terms of hotel, that would also expand the room stock available on the island nationally. The local hotels down there, well, the apartments that are in Union, I also threw the idea out to them. I said, well, when you're rebuilding and renovating, let's expand. One such hotelier went into doing villas. Unfortunately, he built a villa just a few months. It was completed before Hurricane Beryl and was completely wiped out. He had to start again from scratch. He had since bought out other properties and expanded. And all of these developments, you will be accommodated. Well, let me don't say will. Well, at the time when we were there, you were accommodated. With concessions and tax breaks. And based, as I said, based on the value of the investment, sometimes up to 20 years of exemption in taxes. Where there's a hotel improvement construction order, we issue it. It falls under the ordinances for the Hotel Aid Act, and you qualify. There are persons around the medical schools on mainland also benefited from that. In the Rattamil Villa areas. There are persons in rural areas who are building out eco facilities and so on, benefited from that. So don't say locals are not benefiting or don't receive the benefit. That sandals and other foreign investors receive. You essentially drawing a line, an invisible line, and a division that is unnecessary and not needed within the sector, because there are locals who benefit significantly. And I ain't talking about jobs. We ain't touch the use of jobs yet, hundreds of jobs and so on, and tourism exposure and the marketing and so on. We ain't touch the use of improvement in terms of the product and the training. But I'll also tell you something. In my time there as the tourism minister, I also took the opportunity and I went on a training to where you're certified to deal with airline negotiation and marketing. And I took with me a staff member from the tourism authority as well. And even when the former CEO, Annette Mark, she came on, I also encouraged her to sign up for the training. And she took advantage of the opportunity. And I don't know if she went with another, at least I think another staff member went with her. But it was important, and that's what I was doing, building capacity among the persons in tourism, you know. Never before in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we did not have a single person on island who was exposed to training in airline negotiations. There are persons now available on island who are trained. I don't know if all of them who are trained are still in the tourism sector or in the tourism authority. But I ensured, I said, look, we don't have to go out to market, to hire a consultancy firm and pay thousands of you and close to millions of dollars to negotiate with airlines. So we have to build capacity. And I instructed the tourism authority CEO, I said, you have to go on this training. And you have to take some of your staff members with you. And someone who was in an acting capacity before that, I also signed that person up for the training. I said, you have to do it. So there are persons on island. In my time as tourism minister, there are a lot of successes, you know. Where for the very first time we had locals trained in airline negotiation and marketing. So you're able to now go in the back room, assess the numbers, the reports, that the Excel sheets that the airlines would send you with arrivals and their head counts and look at the provisioning and how much they were actually making, how much they were reporting, but what they were actually making in the back room, in the back end. You're able to ascertain all of these information. The route planning. Which areas are more profitable for airlines? How do you propose to pitch to an airline which routes to take up? And not just international airlines, but local airlines, regional airlines as well. We were developing routes coming from the Northern Caribbean. Sunrise and Leeward, but also importantly, Winnie. And many of the other local airlines who were networking to operate. How do you think we were able to There was this issue with the connectivity, getting people into Canawan and Union Island at a certain time. The airlines were coming too late for the smaller planes to have that connectivity. We had to negotiate with them to arrive earlier to facilitate the smaller airlines to ensure that they also had a stake in the game and they stay afloat. Because running an airline, it may seem like a profitable enterprise, but if you're not careful with your route planning and on how you structure your market support and so on, you can literally run an airline at a loss. And Caribbean Airlines recently is a case in point in that, where they were cutting routes even within the Caribbean. So we had persons trained to facilitate negotiations and so on. But importantly, when you go into a negotiating room with some of these large airlines, if it wasn't for the Sandals Resort, American Airlines would not be here in St. Vincent operating. Virgin would not be here, because as much as I wanted to have a more increased activity from Europe, Virgin would tell you, well, listen, Minister, you will need more rooms, because we don't have a problem flying and we have to accommodate the space, but we don't want to fly empty to your island. You need more room stock, and then we can market. And you can provide market support as well within London and Germany and France and so on. But you need more rooms. And that is why there was an aggressive push to expand our room stock. This is far bigger than Sandals, the actual ecosystem that we were building out in tourism and hospitality. Sandals was a byproduct of that, a part of it. Just as how the international airport and the vision to build the airport was a part of it. But hotels like Hotel Alexandrine and Mayor's Suite and Paradise and Beach Comas, they also had an important role to play in all of this. Because the local hoteliers were at the center of the development and the broader vision for tourism development. So we sometimes get sidetracked with the gossip and the sensationalism and the propaganda, and we miss the important element of the broadening framework of our hotel development and tourism development on island. It was centered around the ecosystem and the economic activity, the transformation of our tourism product. And every single tourism service provider, whether you're a hotelier, a tour operator, a taxi operator, a marine tour operator, or service provider, once you were a tourism approved and registered member, you were eligible for concessions. And if you notice, I'm saying were, because as I said, I understand now there is a development within the tourism sector where they're tightening, closing the door on local investors, tightening the concessions that were afforded and available to locals. That is currently taking place. And if I'm incorrect, come to the public and explain why are service providers emailing me, calling me, and making statements to the effect that they're being shut out and refused concessions at a time when we're expanding tourism, at a time when there's transformation in the tourism sector, the drive and the growth, the energy that we created, starting from the building out of the airport at Argyle, the international airport, the support given to us in the sector by many of the local stakeholders and including Sandals. And you're now shutting out local taxi operators. You're now shutting out service providers. Telling them they're not eligible and entitled to concessions. But yet, you have on the other side, the flip side to that, persons singing the tune of the government for them. At we give away too much concessions to foreign investors. But yet the locals here are now currently being shut out by the very said government. Tell me, how is that making any sense? Because I've just spent a significant period outlining the many concessions, the 100% waiver and duty, the many waivers up to tax breaks of up to 20 years based on the value of your investment for locals. I ain't talking foreign investors, I'm talking about local people in the sector. There's a young man who I know from the North Leeward area, he bought a brand new Toyota Hiace. And he was employed. He said, watch now, the money I'm making in tourism, I go into this full time. He resigned his job. And he's now an operator in the sector. He's doing cruise, he's doing the airport, he's working as well with on contract with Sandals. And also he does his own tours. He said, I'm resigning my day job, I'm going into tourism full time. He told me that, and he said, Minister James, I want to thank you very much for the support you have given to me. Because if it wasn't for the Ministry of Tourism and the support in facilitating this concession, I would not have been able to afford this brand new vehicle where I'm now making a full-time living from. Those are the things that we did. And now you're telling me they're tax. And listen, that operator I refer to has not been in the business as long as Kingsley the Freighters, who they refused a concession on a vehicle. Remember I tell you that, The operator who I told you thanked me and said, if it wasn't for the government's initiative to facilitate concessions for brand new vehicles in the hotel sector and tourism sector, he would not have been able to go into tourism full time as a tour operator. And he has not been in the business longer than Kingsley. And they refused Kingsley under NDP government. So if I tell you that is what they're doing, and they're tightening the noose and they're closing the door on our local operators, believe it. They can come and spin it the other way if they want, but there is enough evidence out there, enough people who are saying they have applied and they have been shut out and refused concessions. These are locals. Let us focus on that. Let us focus on what locals are not benefiting from, which they were benefiting from under ULP government, where tourism is concerned. And I want us to listen now to the issue of incentives for our contracts with large companies. And I don't want to single out Sandals, right? But there are other companies who are involved in the tourism sector, not just Sandals. Sandals is actually in contract with some of them. For instance, I'm going to make a mention of one, Correz. And there's also an operator who works along with Sandals to do transportation for workers. That seemed to be, we're nitpicking at things and criticizing investment in tourism. But I want to address something important, which you have to understand tourism as a science and a product. It is not just the nature of the business requires a different type of operation. Now, I'll give you an example. When the cruise ships come here, and there's a reason why they're in contract with couriers, though local taxi operators can also go to the cruise ship boat, and persons on their own can hire a tour operator or taxi. The cruise ships themselves are contracted with tour operators. And one of the major reasons for that is not just about the ability to flow smoothly in terms of the business transaction from one company to the next, but there's something called public liability insurance for tourism service providers. And that is one of the policy initiatives I think we were working on when we left government, and I'm hoping that they're able to continue those discussions and to move in that direction to accommodate the small operators in the business. Now, those of you who are living in the US would know, Americans love to sue. You come off of a ship and you stump your toe, is a lawsuit. You come off of a plane, the sun too hot, is a lawsuit. You get sunburn, is a lawsuit. You go down to a resort, you get food poisoning, is a lawsuit. That is the nature of the American legal system. Persons make millions of dollars in lawsuits yearly. Now, when you have visitors coming to the islands, there are investors who have to protect their interests, and there are operators who have to protect their interests. Now, if I am bringing, I have a cruise ship coming with 2,000 guests, and I say to everybody, well, I'm recommending this tour operator, a small man on the road, and he goes down the road, the brakes cut where he's not maintaining his vehicles properly, and not enough checks and balances, the vehicle turn over. They're not just suing for the local insurance, say, where you get a couple $100,000, you know. They're suing the cruise operator for millions of US dollars in US currency. I want to make that very clear. So you have to understand the nature and the science behind of this thing and how it works. They have to protect themselves. So they will sign contracts with larger companies who are able to set up what is called public liability insurance. And the value of some of these insurance are like $2 million US dollars, 2 million EC. 500,000. Now, a local contractor or operator may not afford or be able to afford public liability insurance to the value of $2 million. But the person who can afford that, the company or the corporation who can afford that, will then hire the local contractor and ensure that the local contractor is able to all of the compliance in terms of checking his brakes, his vehicle is roadworthy, different kind of standards that you will set. But that is not the headache of the cruise operator, or it is not the headache of a large hotel chain like Sandals. It is the headache now of the person with the public liability insurance who has now been contracted to then subcontract the work to the local operators. And that is how the cruise business, the tourism business works across the region. You don't go into business and trade willy-nilly. You have to have your legal departments, your legal team. You have to have public liability insurance. And then the local operator comes under one of these conglomerates or companies who can afford to pay up front, and you have to make a deposit on the public liability side of things. Not just the monthly payment, but or yearly payment, but you have to also have a deposit with some of these companies because of the value of what a claim is likely to be in the tourism sector if someone from North America or Europe is to sue you. They're not going to sue you in Eastern Caribbean currency. So there's this thing called exposure in terms of liability. And larger corporations, they have to protect themselves. And in some instances, they even go as far as the actual hotel you're staying is a separate registered entity or holding than the actual company who's doing the booking. The holding company has a separate liability and exposure to liability different from the company that is doing the sales and different from the company that is doing the transportation and different from the company that's doing the marine tour. And then the local operators now who are involved both in the marine tour and land tours and adventure tours and so on, then fall on any of these subsidiaries or any of these local smaller companies who can afford the public liability insurance. That is how these things work. So you have to have not just common sense, but you have to have a deep understanding of the tourism business and how it works and how company and the exposure and liability and so on, and how they protect their own interests and investment in the sector. Because you're dealing especially with North Americans who once the sun is too hot and they get sunburn, that's a lawsuit. As bad as that. So at every aspect of, and that's why training is important in tourism, and the investment that is put in alone in training. Who you think benefit? The people who are being trained are benefiting from that. Health and safety. There are different levels of requirements and standards that are in place. And even with some of the cruise ships, and you will hear the conversation, but why the tours them don't go by this man in Mespo who have a ital shop, or by this lay down the road grilling pork? I mean, I would love a lot of that. We would love a lot of that to happen. But you have to understand the tour companies as well. They are under public liability insurance. And if the establishment that they have to, I often have to explain this to a few persons in Leeward when the tour buses come and they go to beachfront restaurant. They use that as an example. Beachfront restaurant and bar in Chateaubriand. They don't buy the barbecue from the man on the road. And the reason for that is that beachfront restaurant and bar is under contract with the service provider, who is under a public liability insurance, but not the man doing the barbecue on the road. Because if there's food poisoning, the exposure now to the tour company and the cruise company is then, you can see the ramifications of that. The man on the road is not a man of means, and therefore nobody's going to sue him. Never mind he's the person who might have, left the meat out too long, pick up a couple bacteria and so on, and grill it, put it on the grill too late, and never mind he may be the person who would have caused the injury to the person. But when they're suing for damages, they're not going to sue the man on the road. Hence the reason why you have to have these contractual arrangements with large corporations and smaller ones that can fall under an umbrella of protection in law, where public liability insurance is concerned and where exposure is concerned. That is how these things work. It happens with the cruise ships and in the cruise industry, and the same thing with hotels, especially the bigger the hotel, the value of the hotel investment, the larger the exposure. So it's not just come in and let me trade with this man down the road. Let me buy a $5 thing from this man here, and we support, and we would love that. And that is why we spoke a lot about community tourism and bringing all of these smaller service providers together into an umbrella. And when you bring each individual together, and as a whole, the value of what they have as a whole, there's some of some significant value. And then that now you can then put that on the market under an insurance. But we are far away from that, because a lot of these service providers, they don't think that way collectively. A few of them do. I must give credit to those who appreciate and understand the dynamics of these things. But a lot of these service providers they have been in the business long, but they think, well, they're not at the level where they need to cooperate more and work together to this level. I do a little hustle for myself and my family, but you have to also look at the ecosystem and how working and networking with 2 or 3 or a dozen more smaller service providers gives you that protection, and in terms of liability, public liability insurance, and you can have a package for that particular sector where everybody is able to contribute a small amount what they can afford. And then you can have that direct trading relations now with the larger companies, with those smaller service providers, because they're protected. They're not exposed. That's what we have been speaking about, and the development of networking among the smaller service providers and ensuring that they work together. But you have to have an appreciation of these things before you go on radio or write an article and the smaller man is being left out and all these benefits. And then there are mechanisms in place to protect the smaller operators, but they will have to work under smaller companies that have the protection from exposure. You name any small service provider who can put up $2 million US in public liability insurance. Some of them who are trading in St. Vincent have done so. I know of a few companies who they have the ability and the capacity and the resources to do that, but not every service provider. And that is why they have to also be hired under some of these companies who can afford to have that protection and that liability from exposure. That is why it was designed that way. But does it completely take out the small man? No, it doesn't. Their liability is now absorbed under a company who's protected. And the operation of a company like that, or the protection from exposure to liability, ain't cheap. So you can't pass on 100% to a small operator. You have to then factor out what it is it's going to cost me to pay for this public liability insurance, what it is going to cost me to have my own operation as a service provider. So sometimes when we talk about leakage in tourism, it's actually, yes, there's leakage and it's a regional issue which we have to look at. But a lot of the things that we group as leakage is not necessarily leakage, but it's operational costs for protection of liability from exposure and other things that are centered around health and safety and so on within the sector itself. So it's not because it doesn't trickle down 100% to the service provider at the bottom. Doesn't mean it's going out. There's also the operational costs in the middle to ensure that all of these functioning things are there, to ensure that there's protection from exposure to liability. So I feel bad for Kingsley. That under an NDP government, I don't know if he ever realized that this would have ever happened to him. But Everybody know Kingsley as one of the premier service providers in the as a taxi operator, and Kingsley is deserving of a concession. I don't know if they have since changed that decision to deny him a concession. But I will tell you, there are persons who have less experience and years in the business than Kingsley and were granted concessions. Local people. And hundreds of local Vincentians, locals are benefiting. Whether you're doing tour buses, catamarans, taxis, building hotels, putting on additions, Airbnbs. Once it is a minimum of 5 rooms. So you can build as I said earlier, you can build a 6-room property, live in 1 room, and you put the other 5 rooms out, make them available for guests. That entire property will attract concessions in the importation of materials, in the importation of all your fixtures and furnishings, your bed, your linen, your light, your fittings, your cups, your plates, your bed sheets, your pillowcases, down to pens. I've seen office equipment as well, your printers, your computers. Literally everything that you need to furnish a hotel. Once you are a Vincentian, you are a local, you fall within the requirements of the Hotel Aid Act, you're a service provider, you are qualified for all of these concessions. 100% duty. And I know that because I've signed off on many of those for local operators in the tourism sector while as a Minister of Tourism. So don't let them fool you with the narrative that locals are not benefiting and the package that Sandals got. Look at the value of the investment and what it brings to the country. But there are locals who are equally benefiting from 20 plus years of corporate tax relief. You hear me? And there are locals who will furnish an entire hotel down to the mats and the sheets and the pillowcases. 100% duty for everyone within the sector. And that is a fact. And you have to look at that. So when you hear different conversations surrounding that, I want people who are listening to appreciate how tourism works and what is taking place in tourism. And don't let them mislead you. But right now, I understand that they're shutting down, turning away locals who are applying for concessions in the tourism sector. They can deny it if they want, but there's enough evidence, and I have the emails and the messages to show persons who are being denied concessions were locals. Now, before we open the lines, I want to just briefly touch on another important issue. And I want us to look at the hypocrisy of a number of different groupings and people. Because I recall when we started the discussion surrounding the quarry operation in Richmond, there are a lot of opposition to it from persons who were parts of groups, conservation groups and so on. And I want to single out the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Environmental Fund, the Estuary Conservation Fund. There's a group that they created called the North Leeward Preservation Front. Even the Richmond Vale Academy. They all had their, and rightly so, their concerns and reservations surrounding the Richmond Quarry. And as I had indicated earlier and on a previous program, I was the very first person to alert some of the farmers as to what is taking place at Richmond. And I called one of the farmers in particular. And I said, man, look, I see this thing happening here. Well, you weren't aware of this. I was not aware of this. The approach here clearly is one that is not welcoming in the sense of how it was done. And I accepted that at the very outset. And we had to move in, inform the operator that he needs to do a better job in terms of working with the farmers. Can't just move in and without the consultation and the discussion with the farmers. There are persons who have items planted there. You have to work with them. There's the use of compensation. There's the issue of relocation and so on. And we went and found lands, better lands, more accessible lands to some of these farmers who have said, quite frankly, they were in a better position than where they were in the previous location. They were not only relocated, but they were also compensated. And we had to ensure we go through all of those requirements before a single mining operation can take place at Richmond. Quite naturally, a number of these groups came out, and the Preservation Front was at the front of it. The SG Conservation and Environmental Front. I don't know which one of them had actually sent an objection to the planning board, if it was the Conservation Fund or the Environmental Fund. And I believe it was the Conservation Fund and the Richmond Vale Academy. But to my surprise, and the NDP joined, of course, as the opposition party, then they joined in the chorus, and they stood against the quarry for several reasons. More importantly, the environmental impact that it would create on the local area there in Richmond. But to my surprise, that now they're in government, the very NDP, through one of the government agencies, has applied to the planning board, the planning unit in the Ministry of Planning, for lands and physical planning, to operate a quarry in Wallalebu, which is above the north of the Richmond River. And to my surprise, there is no fanfare or no criticism or critique of this mining operation by the very NDP who, while in opposition, criticized the operation of the quarry at Richmond. And what is even more dangerous is that a study was done that showed that mining in the riverbed, because essentially they're in a riverbed where the lahars came down and so on from the Lassafray, that is what they're mining, has a greater environmental impact than the quarry at Richmond. Because you're in all of the runoff from that operation is going to go, one, not just into the rivers, but also into the sea. It is going to have that adverse impact on the marine life and activity in the area. Same things that were coming out in the Richmond Quarry report. But this is even more adverse because you're literally in a riverbed mining. It means that fisher folk are going to be affected. It means that those who are what we call treachery operators and so on in the area are going to be adversely affected. The environmental impact that is associated with mining in a riverbed is far greater than a quarry on land. Far greater than having a quarry established on land. Because you're in a riverbed. There's going to be runoff, sedimentation. There's going to be the adverse impact on marine life. The best place to go, and immediately as soon as you go out the neutral line, you're catching yellowfin tunas. It's just off the Suffolk Mountain. In Monrong and those areas there. Larakai. Just on the shoreline there, you go a few feet out. It's very deep. Some massive yellowfin tunas and shark and so on you can find there. Lobsters. And those who were listening from North Leeward, you will know this because you know one of the few places on the mainland where you can go and dive and you can get lobsters. They're not the reddish colors, the ones in the southern part of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but you get some massive lobsters over there. More darker in color because they're conditioned in terms of their skin. The darker of the shell is to hide between the dark sand, the black sand from the soufre. So there is no officially the commencement or preparatory work for mining operation by the NDP government in a riverbed in North Leeward, just a few yards off Richmond, where they were criticizing the Richmond Quarry. And all of the conservation groups, I'm calling them out, the SG Conservation Fund, the SG Environmental Fund, the North Leeward so-called Preservation Front, which is a political group established to support the NDP, masquerading as a environmental group to protect the environment. But we all know the players involved in the group were providing support, campaign support for the NDP. Every single environmental group in St. Vincent and the Grenadines has remained quiet on this license now, this application to the planning board by the very government, by the NDP government, who while in opposition was criticizing the quarry operation at Richmond. A few yards up from the same Richmond quarry, starting their own quarry operation. The absurdity of this thing is just so unbelievable. And that everyone has remained mum on this thing. No one has said a word. No group in organization. You saw letters flooding the online publications and the print media. Because it fitted and suited the agenda then. I am not going to say quarries are wonderful things and speak glowingly and nicely about quarry operations, because they do have their negative effects on the environment and their challenges. But then there's also the balance of how you balance development, the use of the aggregate and what it is needed for, and how you ensure that there's minimal damage to the environment. But I would say this, the quarry at Richmond, and I don't need to come here and defend it and defend Reno. He's a businessman, he's an entrepreneur, he can defend himself. But he is going to create far more of a benefit in the area with employment and other things than the quarry that the NDP government is going to operate in the river north of Richmond. Because in that river, all they're going to employ are operators for the heavy equipment. Not individuals. Not ordinary working people in the area. But the devastation and the impact on the environment, you have to ask yourself whether or not it is worth it. It is worth the investment. And if they are mining that to go to use the materials to the roads and other things across the country and to build major projects and so on that benefit the people overall. But you know what they are mining that to do? They are mining that to send it to Canawan for an investor down there to fix up a golf course. That is what that is. They're not mining the aggregate there to go and build roads and hospital for the country, you know. To ship to Canawan, where an investor who is very close to the NDP, very, very, very close to the NDP, which I would say in bed with the NDP, and he may or may not have supported them in the last elections in terms of campaign donations. I don't know. But these are questions which we have to ask and wonder if this is his part of his payback. And how much is he paying the state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the materials they're going to mine to send to Canawan for him? In North Leeward, where fisher folk are going to be affected, where the treasury operators are going to be affected, where the environmental impact is going to be very devastating and severe, where marine life is going to be affected. So a man want to play golf on a more flat and softer area. So you do all these disruptions in the north of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in North Leeward, to benefit a golf and investor in Canawan. Are we being real in this country? These are the things that make you open your eyes in awe, because the hypocrisy of some of these groups like the SG Conservation Fund and the Environmental Fund. You're wondering whether they served any purpose or they were just established as pressure groups against the ULP when they were in office. Because where is the concern? Where is the outcry now? With the damage and effect to the environment and marine life? I wouldn't put the Preservation Front in that grouping, because we know the Preservation Front is an NDP pressure group. It was established by persons who campaigned with the NDP, very closely with the NDP. So we know, we won't be surprised if they don't come out and criticize the operation of this second quarry in North Leeward, just a few yards up from the Richmond quarry. But the SVG Conservation Fund and the Environmental Fund, which was established as a national body, where are your letters and your objections? And if you have objected, I stand corrected. But where is the public outcry and the criticism of this NDP administration in setting up a second quarry in North Leeward? And I will tell you something, you know. While I was in the cabinet, there were several proposals regarding bringing a second quarry in North Leeward, north of Richmond. And I was one of the first persons to object to it. I said, listen, I can't deal with that again in North Leeward. Especially one that is going to go into a riverbed to mine. That ain't happening under my watch. And I never supported any of those proposals that came. But as soon as the government changed office, bam, no questions asked, second quarry operation in a riverbed in North Leeward, a few yards from Reno. But of course, the Reno quarry was politicized. And they wore the mass of an environmental concerns and the plea of the farmers, and farmers were heavily compensated, got better lands they can drive onto with the vehicles. In fact, in some areas, the very company Reno went in and cut new roads for some of the farmers, and we made sure he did that. I said we have to put the farmers in a better position than they were at the site where you're now mining. We have to work with the farmers. And we held him accountable for that. And he went over and beyond to ensure the farmers were well taken care of. And the opposition, who criticized that quarry operation, is now in government and doing a second quarry just a few yards up from Reno. You wonder why? One of the reasons why, the hypocrisy of it is, I understand. In fact, I got this from a government official who said one of the very first things they did when they came to office, they were surprised that the NDP had reached out to the very said Reno to ask him what is the price of materials, because they wanted to then use materials from there to go to Canawan and Union Island. But more so Canawan, not just at the airport site, but also they were already in discussions with the investor down there about his golf course. Because I understand he said, well, y'all don't win the elections, I did what I had to do. Now it's my turn, now I scratch in my hand, I want some quarry materials to smooth off my golf course. And where they turned to is North Leeward, right next to Reno Quarry, few yards up. The hypocrisy of this thing is so unreal. It's unbelievable. And yet, that operation north of Richmond has greater implication on the environment than the existing quarry operation at Richmond. You hear me? And there is complete silence from every so-called environmental group in St. Vincent and the Grenadines on it. Complete silence. There's no protest. There's no march. There are no letters. It's as if the quarry operation in Waterloo was not happening. Or they're turning their eye to it, or closing their eyes to it and pretending it doesn't exist. Well done. And to those in North Leeward who are critical of the quarry in Richmond, where are your voices now? Where are your voices now? There's even a second quarry now that has a greater environmental impact, because it's been now mining in a riverbed where the runoff of that is going to have a severe impact on marine life and activity. a direct impact, not runoffs from a quarry on the land, as in the case of Reno, where the runoff there to the river and to marine life being affected was minimal. But in this case, there is a direct implication. It is going to directly affect marine life because it is in mining literally in a riverbed. So this is unbelievable that people would remain quiet. They make so much noise with the Reno issue, but they will remain quiet on the second quarry, as if to pretend it doesn't exist. But I'm going to bring it here on the record, and there are people in the country who are going to be made aware of it, and the hypocrisy of all of these groups. I have absolutely no respect for anyone who is a registered member of the SG Conservation Fund, the SG Environmental Fund, the North Leeward Preservation Front especially, because of this hypocrisy. Plain and straight. And this is what you call a complete dereliction of your duty of environment, of being environmental, at your environmental stewardship, and what you signed up to do. You volunteered, nobody asked you, you volunteered to associate yourselves as vanguards of the environment. Where are your letters of objection? Your public criticism?
Well, already, Mr. James, there is a concerned residents of North Leeward. Is a question: what impact would the NDP quarry will have on the quarry already operating in Richmond?
Well, it is having two competing quarries in the same area. I am not too concerned about Reno and his existing operation in terms of his profitability. I'm here, and my concern is about the people and the environmental impact that it will have on the fragile environment that is around there, north of Richmond. Because if you think Richmond is bad, when you go further north, right under the volcano, that is where all the devastation, the wildlife, the marine life just off Monrong and Larakai. That is what I'm concerned about. It may very well be a case where they compete against Reno would have to maybe look at reducing his workload. Again, that is a direct impact on unemployment in the area. But Reno is a wealthy businessman. I don't need to come here to defend him. And that is not my main objective and concern for raising this. He can defend himself. And I'm sure his business operation, he would have done his calculation and his maths in relation to that. But my concern is, how can we be so hypocritical? All of them, every single person who ever uttered their mouths, every single radio host, quote unquote so-called environmentalists, or groupings or registered groups that call themselves environmental fronts and funds, every single social commentator who had something to say about the Reno operation, you are a hypocrite. And the NDP is the biggest hypocrite of them all. Because in opposition, you criticize the operation of a quarry in North Leeward. You said it was going to create more damaging impact and effect on the environment than the employment it was going to create. He didn't care whether the material from there went to service government roads or hospitals or the port that was under construction. He took a hard line on the impact it created on the environment and especially the farmers. And while that is your right to do, in opposition, I want you to hold that same narrative while in government. This is now not the NDP giving a license to a private operator to operate. This is the very same NDP, because it's a government quarry, a government mining operation. It is a government mining operation by the NDP while in government, who in opposition criticize the mining operation for Reno in Richmond, and a few yards up from Reno, the very NDP government is establishing a similar quarry in a riverbed. In a riverbed that has more devastating impact on the environment, and has significantly more devastating impact on marine life. Because the studies show it. The reports show it. The hypocrisy of this thing it is so unreal. Where are the voices? This is so unbelievable. I think, Monique, we should open the lines now. And I don't know, let me see what time it is. Well, it is now past 12:30 and the lines are open.
All right.
You know, I know people are listening and they enjoyed the program this morning. A lot of persons who they listen keenly, because on the record you're going to hear things here on the record that you didn't hear from before, and that is what On the Record is about.
That's right. Before we take some calls, I've got another question. Based on information reaching you, can you tell the nation if SVG's tourism product has improved in value or not?
Well, it's a very important question that listener is raising. The question as to improved in value is something. What we're seeing the currently in the first quarter of the year. Remember last year, we had a record year in terms of silver arrivals. Very first time in the history of our tourism we're hitting 120,000 silver arrivals. That was followed by another record year the year before. The very first time we were reaching 100,000. And we had a consultant, the very person who was involved in tourism, walking along with me. And I called him, I said, good friend of mine, and I said, listen, the year 2024 when we were going to hit 100,000, I said, despite the fall off and barrel, I think we're going to hit the 100,000 mark for the very first time in the history of our country's tourism. He said, you're doing well, but I think give it a few more years, you'll reach I said, no. This year we're on track. We're hitting that 100,000. And so said, so done. We got over 100,000 and 101,000 plus something that year. And then we set the target. We said we're going to go to 20. We're adding 20,000 more silver visitors to the island in 2025. And many persons thought that, well, boy, that's a huge target to jump to an additional 20,000 people in 1 year. How are you going to accomplish that? And we set about an aggressive marketing agenda. And we work closely with the airlines. We work closely with all the major players, including Sandals and all of the local hoteliers. We offered better rates and so on. And we built out better products like the to ensure that there's not just seasonal tourism, but every quarter of the year there was some activity to attend in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And because of that, we reached the mark of 120. So what you're seeing in the first quarter of 2026 is a spill-off in growth from the work of the previous government. I must have to add that. As to whether this growth will continue, I'm hoping for the sake of the country it does. But we are going to be met now with several challenges. If this war is a protracted period of uncertainty with oil prices, later in the summer going into the winter season, it can trigger higher fuel prices, which also trigger higher prices for tickets, airline tickets. So you may eventually see less persons traveling, or the spending power that persons may have to go on vacation may be reduced. That is what's happening in Europe now. So you have a decline in persons traveling from the United Kingdom to the Caribbean region, not just St. Vincent. They're opting now for shorter stays because in the UK, persons tend to come and spend a longer period. They're now they're going now opting for places like Cyprus and south of France and Spain, where they can have shorter vacation periods and less spend in terms of travel. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen with our North American market. The proximity to the Caribbean market allows for an easier route of traveling. But also you have to look at the visitor spend. Will there be a reduced visitor spend? There likely would be a reduced visitor spend, because if the disposable income of persons who are traveling is not as great as it was a year or two ago, then it opens up for some of these challenges. So it is a period of uncertainty, but the projections are showing that the Caribbean region should ride this wave and have some growth, some medium to short-term growth in tourism, which will have that, and that is as a result of a lot of the legwork that was done in our recovery post-COVID, collectively as a CTO. Remember, we elected St. Vincent and Grenadines as vice chair of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, a position which I lobbied to ensure, and we put Barbados there as the chair, and Grenada is also the second vice chair. So we have had a rebound effect coming off of the post-pandemic, and then St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have had the double whammy of the Beryl and the hurricane, but we have done well. We have done a lot of good work, hard work in tourism. Annette Mark and her team, Glenn from before that, Faylene and all of the hard working staff at the Ministry of Tourism. They have done well. More capacity, do we need more of that? More training and capacity building? Yes, of course. There are lots of shortcomings, lots of gaps as a developing country. I'm not going to fault the civil servants for that, but more resources are needed. And now when we need to be ramping up not just our skill sets in the professions in terms of the tourism policy component and the marketing. We are without a chair of the tourism authority. The concessions, I'm told that now that stakeholders benefited from, they're now cutting them back. So how do we expand and grow tourism? So you will see some positive growth, but a lot of that is a spill off from the investment and the hard work of the year 2024, 2025, our post-recovery volcano and Beryl. And that is what you're reaping the benefits of that now. And to answer the question.
Okay. Well, I'm just inviting folks to call to make your contribution to the program for 517-827, 534-7827. And I can see the North Leeward folks champion that the live, I'm telling you. They definitely champion the live.
You have to have a great appreciation of where we were as a people and where we are now. But also, more importantly, our concern should be where we're going. And I want to credit a lot of the hard work and a lot of all of us as cabinet ministers. We worked well with the various ministries, our portfolios, the civil servants. They delivered with the gaps and the challenges that they had. They also delivered. But you must have leadership and you must have vision. And Comrade Ralph, when he started rebuilding St. Vincent and the Grenadines and shaping for the last quarter century this country, he didn't just say, well, we're going to build an airport and put hotels and open up the economy. He said, look, we have to start with our human resource. And we created this opportunity for growth in the sectors Education was one of them. Moving from a period where you had 4 graduate teachers at primary level. Now nearly every teacher who's enrolled is either a graduate or in school right now, doing an undergrad. In the first 10 years of the ULP government, we built 10 schools. That's a school for every year of the first 2 terms. Expanded education, built out schools, Central Leeward, the Barley Secondary, Central Leeward. You go out the Sandy Bay School, and in rural areas as well. There's now a secondary school in Canawan. I'm picking those areas because of the disparity in terms of where the quote unquote disparity in the spreading of the education and the resources, the educational resources. So when you talk about where we're coming from, and then housing, you might be lucky, Monique, to drive around and find any Watland Daba, if you find any boat houses. If you do find a boat house, it's a quality boat house, well built, with a good foundation. But how the housing stock has improved markedly because of the policy of the 100% mortgage that we've created. The housing lots in Fitzhugh, in Cumberland, in Peters Hope on the Leeward side, in Connery, and across the whole country. In Diamond, where ordinary working people would take them years, to find the resources to even start a house, much less to finish it. We had low-income houses, no-income houses, and houses and concessions for persons who wanted to go to the bank to take a loan once you're a public servant. And then as much as they were critical of, and the propaganda, Monique, as much as you're critical of healthcare, look, there are instances of just terrible delivery of healthcare in modern societies, in Europe, in North America. There are people who sue these states, whether you're in New York or in Washington or wherever, daily, because of poor delivery of healthcare. Not that there's not quality healthcare or the resources, but sometimes there are instances where there are medical malpractice. And I will go to the point that we have put in place resources. We should have more, but as a developing country, you survive with what you have. But we have had good doctors, good professionals, good nurses who have delivered quality healthcare in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have had challenges and we have had shortcomings in some of those aspects. When you go to UNN Island, we build out a brand new facility. In Chateaubriand, remodeled the facility down in Bocamen, the polyclinic in Stubbs, in Georgetown, in Maracua. There's not a part of the country you won't go and you find a well-suited medical facility that can deliver healthcare. Taking healthcare delivery right to the doorsteps of people across the country. Sometimes we start to come in tongue to every body shop at accident and emergency when you don't even have an accident and emergency. Now you have all of these old clinics and polyclinics and smart hospitals and smart facilities. We take these things for granted.
I think you're drawing out the people, Minister, former Minister. I think you're drawing them out. Because there's a question on health. This person wants to know if that you're aware, or if our comrade leader is aware, that 5 of the Cuban doctors already gone back to Cuba, and the accident and emergency section at the Modern Health has been closed for a while now.
Yeah, that and I'm not surprised, and more will leave. We must give credit to the Cuban doctors who have delivered quality healthcare. They've brought a level of professionalism here in terms of the specialization that they bring. We have good doctors, But there are specialist doctors who were here, spent years with us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Look at, there are times when you go to the hospital, they don't know if you're leaving. But now, the people who, the amputation rate in St. Vincent was so high. We were able to deal with that. Preventative health care, work with people and so on. We brought in specialist persons here. Neurologists and those persons who in oncology and other things and so on. you get some of the delivery of healthcare here is better than in some places that are quote unquote developed. So I'm not surprised more Cuban doctors will leave and they will send them home because that they said it. You have to listen to what is being said and what is not being said. The Americans came and said you have to get rid of Cuban doctors. And they said, oh well, you will be phasing them out, in a structured no, in other words, you're getting rid of the Cuban doctors. Point blank and simple. You're getting rid of them. Other countries are doing it too, under the pressure from the US. But you know for sure, places like St. Vincent, with Comrade Ralph and Mayor Motley and a number of the strong comrades around, would stand up and fight. But Jamaica, who many consider in international relations and political economic terms is a lapdog of the US, and they immediately terminated the program. And so too did St. Vincent indirectly. So too did St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's not a surprise. And while we're talking many different things, I want to mention, in Union, I got a concern raised earlier by someone who was asking, they have refurbished, well, we started the refurbished work at the Union Island Airport, post-burial. And now Union Island Airport is operational. It is now not fully operational because there's an issue now with the fire truck. You must have a fire service station at the airport in cases of emergency, Monique. And I understand now that they have not even moved to rectify that problem. That is one of the hold up, the issues there with regular flights coming now from Union Island. And I want them to address these things and come to the public. And why is it that the Union Island Airport, which is a very, not like the Jeff Mitchell Airport in Beckway, the Union Island Airport is a very active airport, a very active runway, is without a fire tender, a proper functioning fire tender. And I'm asking the authorities to immediately address this issue in the interest of the people, because not just for tourists and so on. I had some guests who came in the country. They went to Myra on the weekend, and also they told me, well, they had to go through Canawan because something challenges with the Union Island Airport as well, and they're now staying at Sandals. So people, when they come here, they don't just go to Sandals, Monique. That's another point. They go to other places. They stay at other resorts. There's a spill-off effect. But I understand there are periodic flights coming out of Union Island now because they have not addressed the issue of the fire tender, which is something that should be rectified immediately because of how important the Union Island Airport is as a hub. So we have to be serious about holding our governments accountable. And I say governments plural because I'm not just talking about an NDP government. Any government, including a ULP government. Because when the ULP get back in office, you as supporters and comrades and the people, you also have a role to play in holding the government accountable as well. And we have to be fair and balanced in this. And I don't want to come here and talk about the NDP and don't talk about a ULP government as well. We have to serve our people better and do a lot more work in communicating with our people so that they can understand and appreciate how developmental politics work, how the economy work, how a small island developing states, our challenges, why you can't get the road fixed in front of your house because there are some implications that we have to shift resources to deal with. Why this can't happen, why this should happen, and why we have to put this at the front of the agenda. Why we have to be sometimes not political but philosophical in our thinking and what we do. Like our fight for reparatory justice, and why it has to be at the front of the agenda. There are things that we have to do, our political education, our edification as a people. We have to do a better job. To be more informed, to be better informed, to lift our social consciousness. And we have to do these things in a responsible manner. And that is why when we are critical of a quarry operation, we shouldn't just be critical of a quarry operation in opposition and informing government, and then opening a second quarry just next door to the same quarry that we criticize. And the people who are criticizing now are suddenly silent. What does that say about our people? What does that say? The level of hypocrisy and silence now that is so deafening on the issue of the Richmond, the new quarry north of Richmond. What does that tell you about these kind of people? And we have a responsibility, and as leaders and as community builders, we also have a responsibility to speak up. And we have a responsibility to inform and to educate and to help. And I'm putting a charge out to the next ULP government. We have to stay true to our philosophical groundings and what we stand for, and when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. And if we say we're going to work with our communities and our people, we have to build our grassroots, we have to do that. Because I sense there are significant gaps where political education is concerned, where social commentary that is of quality. And a man could come and write a whole article and come on a radio program and tell you the former government sell lands for 14 cents. 14 cents per square foot. I mean, that rate nearly is as good as the amount of lands we give out to poor people across the whole country. At 10 cents per square foot, you know, Monique. Yeah. we give lands to people across the whole country. 10 cents per square foot on the whole estates. Come in and pay 10 cents per square foot. 10 cents. And we're going to sell lands to a developer for 14 cents, 4 cents more. I mean, just that alone, the stupidity of the whole thing, just that alone can tell. And these are the people that masquerade as influencers and social commentators that shape and form the minds of Vincentians. And we have to really lift the level of our consciousness. And when we talk about that, it's not just holding the government accountable, but also holding the opposition accountable. And if the opposition is not doing enough work that they need to do, you have to raise the red flag and say, yes, well, you call them out. But I know most people think that we're doing a good job so far. I think we have a caller on the line. Yes, caller, welcome. You're on the record.
Yes, Carlos, this is Kojo.
Yes, man. Good to hear you.
I think our party need to teach or educate people about the philosophy of the two different parties. I think a lot of people, they don't know the difference and the connection that one party is to the whole world body, like the NDP, who they're connected to. Because people just see an NDP in St. Vincent as NDP, but they don't know the affiliation of the NDP. Because a lot of these people who support an NDP will not support the Republican Party.
Yeah. No,
they don't realize that. They don't realize that the NDP is basically the Republican Party in St. Vincent.
It's a very, very valid point you're making, and they're more in line with the the conservatives, and they're more what I would say far right,
Right.
center right, and as opposed to us who were traditionally and historically from our philosophical foundation more center left, and that is more in line with the struggles of our working people. And you were not at the National Council, Udrin St. Vincent, just last week, Tuesday, a massive turnout. And I spoke at the National Council.
I saw it on Facebook.
Yeah, I spoke at the National Council, and I told the audience there, I say, listen, I told them, I say, you see all the gains that we made under ULP government that they're now cutting back on? Because they're cutting back on a lot of things. I said, if you think Ralph was progressive, I said, the next generation of leaders under ULP, we learn under Ralph, we grew up under Ralph, we were trained under Ralph, we were skilled under Ralph. And if you think Ralph was progressive, we're going to be more progressive. We're going to build more houses for poor people. We're going to create more educational opportunities for the working class. We're going to provide more and significant opportunities for the rank and file and working people in the country. Far more than the former ULP government. And I told them that as soon as we get back in office, you're going to see a more radical Unity Labour Party government, because a lot of the gains that we made in the last quarter century, they're going to cut them back, We're going to see an erosion of those gains. And I told our National Council, coach, I said, we're going to have to work double time to catch up and to make back up for those gains that we're going to see eroded in the next couple of months or years under NDP government. And I said, because of that, we have to be far more radical in our approach than the comrade leader Ralph. We have to be far more astute than him and the next generation of leadership under the Unity Labour Party. And I'm going to put them on the front burner, that they have to be far more radical, far more in line and in tune with our working people, to ensure that there are more progressive policies put in place for a poor and working class. Simply because the significant erosions we're going to see now is going to take our country back than take us, maintain where we are and take us forward. So we have to be more radical and far more socially oriented to our working people.
If people look at what the Republican Party is doing here, it's basically the same thing the NDP is doing. They don't deal with the people. They deal with the people with money. All the tax break that the Republican Party is giving out right now is for the millionaires, not for the poor people, not for the people who really need it. And it's the same. When a party tell you that they're going to be a business party, a business-oriented party, that means they don't have nothing to do with the mass of people.
Yeah.
People must know those things. These are the things that people need to be educated. Business people do not create jobs just for job's sake. Whereas the government normally create jobs for job's sake because they know that then people have to be employed. When I hear a party tell you that the workforce is too large for the government, remember that they're not looking to create work for you. And that's what's going to happen with the recession coming.
No, man, we are going to regress. We're going to see aspects of that, but it's up to the people to stop this regression, and it's for us to stop it by coming out and putting a lot of pressure to ensure that they keep a lot of the policies and programs that the ULP government had instituted. And as I said, our next ULP government has to be far more progressive and far more aggressive and astute and in tune with our communities and our working people than Ralph. And all of us, we are students of the comrade, and we are going to ensure the legacy of a Labour government continues. And that is what we're going to have to do to
another point I'd like to hear you were talking about the people with insurance and what because in terms of food, and a lot of these street vendors around carnival time, they need to know that food handling is a very, very, very major part of the thing.
Yes.
You could be a very good cook, but if you're not a good food handler, your business is not going to prosper.
Yeah.
You know, food has to stay warm at a certain level and maintain that heat so you could avoid salmonella building up and all kind of bacteria building up. So, I mean, we need to develop that habit of making sure that, you know, the food handling is a major thing in St. Vincent. Not somebody just throw up a barbecue grill and start turning grills and food contamination, this meat in almost mixing up with the other. You know, there's a lot of things that I see when I walk through that, you know, they could do better with, but, you know.
Yeah.
Lucky so we have
point taken. I agree. I agree with you on that point. I agree with you on that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my point. I'm glad that I want people to be more educated about the difference of the two political parties, because it's not just NDP because you like NDP and you hate Ralph because you hate Ralph. You have to know the party, what the party stand for.
I said to someone recently, the young people who were jumping up yellow as the code without having an appreciation or understanding of the philosophy of what the NDP represents. They're now realizing, a lot of them, they communicate with me, a lot of them are now saying, boy, well, you know, we was just jumping, we think, well, the yellow thing was a slang, you know. But now, we realize them fellas ain't ready yet. At least under ULP, this was happening or that was happening. So I say, well, you see, you're not living long enough to grow up under an NDP government to appreciate the challenges we had as poor working people. I say, I went to half the school. When banana was gold and king and millions were coming into this country here, we were seeing profits and the treasury was not in the red. You know, growth and so on. We had schools across the entire country and half the ship systems. And I was a product of one of those.
I know a lot of them young people didn't grow up under NDP when the Camden Park was a busy, a lively spot where vans from the Leeward used to drop people all the way down to Camden Park because it wasn't enough van.
Mm-hmm.
That was a booming industry in St. Vincent. There was a booming industry, and that died out under NDP.
Yeah. So
they never survive again.
They have been known to cut programs, cut projects, cut things that are of a benefit to the working people. We've always known this, but young people would over the next couple of months they would get an appreciation of that, and it's for them to feel it and experience it, to know not to make this error and mistake again.
And I know that they're going to see how much of those gains that the NDP ULP created, how much of those things that they could cut down and close down and stop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing. They don't. The NDP is not a party that wants to spend money. They like to say, "Oh, we have a budget. We have a surplus budget." While the mass of people go hungry.
And they cut the things that are progressive for the working people.
And like I hear a lady said the other day, poor people like to know that the road fixed. I prefer to know poor people eating than to have a piece of good road. I mean, I ain't saying that you don't need good road, but if good road is the only thing you want, I want to eating, want to housing, to medical, all those things. I mean, St. Vincent doesn't produce much to have a big surplus budget. And in terms of debt, I hear people crying, "Oh, debt." American debt is big.
Trillions of dollars.
America does
Trillions.
Money. America just keep printing money.
Yeah, you're quite right on that point. There's a conversation.
Drop.
You go ahead.
No, the Japan economy, their GDP is high, 100 and something.
Right,
I mean,
and the point I was making to support you there, Coach, is that all the major economies, they do have debt. In fact, the debt to GDP in the US is in the trillions. And when you look at, you have to look at what you have that is measurable. There's bad debt, there's good debt. And a lot of the debt we have is good debt, where there are low interest, long-term repayment loans that are on a concessionary terms. They're not high interest debt that are volatile and put our country's exposure in terms of our risk and so on, to high levels where you're talking 9, 10, 12, 13% in terms of repayment. Some of these debts, you're talking 1.5% interest payment. So it is manageable over a period, yes. Was the debt created as a result of many catastrophic challenges, including a volcano that erupted, including a Category 4 hurricane? Yes. Let us be real and honest with these things.
Dr. Hollis, all them business in St. Vincent, if you go to them, they have a thing they call overdraft. But no business take out their own cash and go and buy stuff. They take it on credit and they pay at a percentage rate.
Yeah.
That's how business turnover. Yes, a man might be rich and put up a piece of money, but I think he can take out his $100,000 a year in the bank and just throw it into a business. So without think, he go to the bank with it, know that he has $100,000. He go to the bank, he say, I have $100,000 here, I want to borrow towards that. So I borrow $300,000. I could afford to pay X amount. That's how business is.
Yeah.
So you pay. Once you can manage your debt, that's the most important thing. Once you can manage your debt.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't understand how people think St. Vincent debt is so high again. Come on. If you're paying your debt, because nobody's going to lend you money if you can't afford to pay your debt. When they look at your books, they say, yeah, you could pay your debt. Then they lend you money.
So true.
Yeah, let me need somebody else to call.
Yes, comrade. Thank you very much for your contribution. I appreciate that.
All right.
Good and valuable contribution as always. Our brother there, Coach Joe. You have another call? Okay. Yes. Yes, caller. Welcome. Yes, caller. You on the record?
If you're paying your debt, because nobody's going to lend you money if you can't afford.
And we had a little. Yes, comrade. Good to hear you. I'm hearing you now.
Oh, okay, good. Because I'm with I see you taking okay. So because we all the people who park our place, so the young people never see what the opposition was like. So now that, in my opinion, they're looking and seeing what the opposition is now the party now. Now is your time, in my opinion, to convince these younger people. Okay, what life, and I've heard you mention it quite a few times, which I'm impressed with, that you'll be more aggressive, even more than our prime minister, our prime minister. And I love that, because you have to be this aggressive for the younger people. People like me and these other guys, we're old already, so we know what the U.S. and the government have done in the past. I want you now, coming up as a future leader, to show and tell the young people what you have in mind and all what you know. And I'm sure you and whoever comes in, taking advice from all the past leaders from could do this. So that's all I'm asking. Please, show us what you can do for the next, because I'm not even sure if this opposition, this party right now can last 5 years. But I give them at least $5. $5 years. So now is your time to shine. All right.
All right, comrade.
I know this badly known. I know this badly known.
Yeah,
On and on and
we
on. But
we
I'm just trying to tell you what my opinion is like. All right.
all right. Thank you for your contribution. The comrade made
All
a
right.
made
Thanks,
a.
man.
He was in and out. A few persons were not picking him up very clearly on air, but essentially, Caddy was saying, look, we have to prepare ourselves and we have to, you know, be more vigilant in our approach so we can prepare ourselves to go back into government. And I quite agree with him on that. You know, he said, well, he doesn't think the current government will last a full 5-year term. And the rate at which they're going, I mean, many people have that same opinion. I think we have a call on the line. Yeah, but many persons have the same opinion. We have to, all of us as Vincentians, I don't think it's to answer Caddy's, I don't think it's a issue for just the parliamentarians or the former cabinet members, but also Vincentians, all of us, we have to come together and really work together in the interest of the working people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Yes, caller, you're on the line. You're on the record. Welcome.
Good day, mate. You know, I just forgot all the names so bad. And so close, but yet so far. But yet, yes, man, Vincent and Miss ULP party bail back. And the members and the kind of thing they were doing, he kind of progress, he put his terror, big one, big this, that, and if you're really way back, well, imagine that you have white cruise ship boats and all kind of thing was to build and
Yeah.
sandal and everything, spread out the wings.
Let me tell you what would have happened at least in the first year or two of a government if the ULP were to return to office. Immediately, we were going to look at expanding the cruise terminal and had already started having conversations with a developer to have a developed cruise pier, but also duty-free shops, a hotel at the front of the Kingston, a refurbished Kingston in the city, more space for traders and persons in the sector and so on. Immediately, the Beaches Resort, they would have already been on the ground preparing their designs and ready to do soil testing and to start the foundation and so on to move ahead aggressively with the expansion of the build out of the new beaches project in St. Vincent. There were other hotels to come on stream like the Marriott. By now, the foundation would have been headway into the foundation to build out the Marriott at Peters Hope. By now, the designs for Cumberland were already pretty much prepared and ready to go. The developer who was interested in coming there, working closely with the contractor for the Marriott, they were already making plans by midterm to clear ground to start the construction of that hotel. And I am telling you, a lot of development, a lot of opportunities for jobs and the creation of growth in the economy, we would have been further ahead than where we are. The stagnation we have seen in the last 6 months at least has been stifling on the people of St. Vincent and Grenadines.
You know, Vincent, they block themselves. They destroy themselves. They destroy them vision for now. They destroy the working ethic by slowing down communist government. They destroy the spending mood. They destroy the happiness. And I look at that regretting because I might be shifty. But I ain't PM not the boy. You know, the NDP so bishop, they might want to destroy and everything and all kind of things. We're not afraid and all kind of things. But I'll tell you something here. If you listen, we will tell you something now. You said that good government. And you may big out the world so much. Look at the government and they still have you felt up going places that you can't go and that's all you want them. They're really a good government and if not, you know what you can beg it. Don't tell something. The NDP afraid you in government. They afraid you as a prime minister. They afraid you as an opposition leader. NDP will afraid you evil for even them. Even they are your own. They will balance so much. They will feel they will afraid you because what they do, They want you to be out of existence. When nobody at all has even got anything like that. And as long as you stay around educating that, the president who want to dead. So you're not afraid to put them. Because you're the long living person, you have a good mind, and you're not having the standard to good things. They have all in mind, they don't have any mistakes, and they know well sooner or later. People are going to start to get back in. Start to get back in to continue different. You know what I say? You're spoiling the Vincent.
Yeah.
You spoil Vincent and you eat them. You spend the money on them. You make things wealthy. You might have having the best climate and living in the best house, you might have the best education. Who ain't going to be that? Because the next party come and lie their ways. Oh, we're going to make double this, do double that, because this, do this. And they make a foul of intention.
Yeah.
Every part of when the country come like a blight. Blight, a cost, they come like come on the country. No development, no better activity. Then they know to start with to begin with to go on up and things like that. They bring a cost company country. When they say, if I like this come out of country. Like it, when they think the species start of destruction. When they come out of intention, believe in God, find a Bible in church that they could praise your God. And why talking in another one long enough is what happens for real. So don't feel like running on in the government. I am talking what's happening. So, good man and good man. When a man who was to good, why don't that preference to see? When a bad, you're bad. This is when a good man in power. If people rejoice and enjoy it, they'll fall back, then they buy them back for you. They find house and houses for you when you're in hurricane mash it up. Now this fellow and them was complaining all the time, oh, the government stays so long to pick up people out the union, it's been saying all kinds of things, and government is slow, and the government has told out to pick up, when else not paid. Try to lie their way into government. Now they got him take funds and they have to go out there. They said, hello, where you are with you people, you see going on? And all along when you take time for it, you got to bring back the Prime Minister. You don't take your time. You don't take your time to bring back the Prime Minister. Because the market to the guys, they get things sell. The guys are putting market stars. Everything is bumbling up. They talk about it, and destroy. They talk about it, they bring back steel, all kinds of things, are not eat and go stale. What do they want to do? Go a stale mine to keep this around, to torture all you, to destroy all you. Imagine talking to the bank, and a bank done the already, we get 4 or 5%. The Loving Bank is 7 or 8%. One Charlie, one boat to buy a fishing Charlie to go for the water is millions of dollars. In enough 500,000, millions of dollars. Even 3 million to put one Charlie would put
fishing. It sounds like it's a piggy bank they want to open, man. Sounds like a piggy bank they want to open.
Yeah.
Because you have to deal with capitalization, and that is where the issue is. How do you capitalize a development bank?
That they can't buy one boat. So,
all right, thank you for your contribution. All the best. All right, so we are winding down to the end of today's program. Ling. We have room for just a few more callers, a few more minutes actually. And I do have an appointment. So there's a hard stop at 1:30. So just a few more minutes as we wind down on today's program. I want to thank those who stayed with us all throughout the morning, those who listened, those who contributed, those who called, and of course, those who shared the information around and invited other persons to join the program, to tune in and to view the program, whether you're in St. Vincent and the Grenadines or whether you are in the region or in the diaspora. I'm happy to be here with you. And of course, it's all about political education. It's all about lifting our consciousness and working together in love and solidarity as a people. We have had some challenges, but if we work together as Vincentians, we will obviously see the benefits of that collaboration and solidarity and love It's important for us to do that. It's important for us to continue on ensuring the policies, the good and positive policies of the Unity Labour Party government. We are a party that is historically centre-left. It means that our social programs are catered and geared towards the working class people. It's not about looking good on the books and ensuring that the country makes a profit. A country is not here to be in the blue. A country is here to ensure that the people of the country are benefiting. And it's not about arithmetic. It's about development. It's about our people and ensuring that their lives are better. And we will continue to hold through to these progressive policies and programs. And this is what a Unity Labour Party government represents and what it is about. Until next time, comrades, I will be here with you on the record for another week. My co-host, we're hoping to have her in virtually at some point. But my co-host, hopefully she's back by the time of the next program. But on behalf of myself and KMP, much love to you people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, those at home and those that are abroad. All the best to you and have an enjoyable afternoon.
Help, murder, feeling the pain, we can't take the pressure. Pain, we crying, somebody got to do something. Right now we really need a Messiah. Don't take me out of this big town.